And just to let everyone know, just so you're on the right area here, we are on track 2, industry tools and resources. And this is using the Endeavor model for information exchange. You can see the track 1 and track 3 other areas that are in play right now. If you're on the wrong track, you can revert over to AHC 2021, log off the site, and then go to ahc2021.com, and you can select the track that you wanted to be in. Of course.
Yeah, so if you thought this was the Paula Deen cooking show, you're in the wrong track, I guess is what John is saying.
I better leave.
Yeah, so no, this has been I have to say, I have not been involved and engaged in anything of this magnitude on such a summit, certainly trying to do this virtually, George. I know we talked about it with Tom a couple days ago, but boy, oh boy, what a, I mean, this has been, just to put this over, I'm glad there were smarter people than me.
You're absolutely right. To pull this off, something of this magnitude, 60 plus speakers, encompassing 3 days, and it really is going off. I think without a hitch. You and Laura and Abel and Tom have done a great job, I think, of making our life a little easier, and certainly for the panelists and the speakers. So kudos to all of you for pulling this off. We've learned a lot from the coronavirus. If not, some of the lessons learned is how do we deal with a virtual platform and pull it off without too much of a hitch.
Well, and the funny thing about it, George, is this has been fun too. This has not been work for us, and the key is that most of these people, I certainly don't know everyone that are on these charts. But I know I saw Carmela yesterday on the track. I mean, Carmela, you've been involved and engaged in, good Lord, it seems like the 15 years that we've been on this thing, you've certainly been close, if not all to the day. I mean, Molly has been involved on almost I won't say daily basis, Molly. It feels like that, I would think. But we're dealing with them all the time. Patrick has been engaged in this quite a bit. And I mean, just looking at these names, it's just been more of a labor of love with friends. I miss them. I mean, that's the problem, is not shaking hands and saying hello, but we do them the best we can.
Yeah, and actually, I know this is all being recorded, John, so folks can take advantage of it. I guess as we get towards the end, I think Tom or someone will speak to how you can access some of this information. But just having access to some of the slides, the presenters' contact information, the networking that's afforded to all of us through this virtual platform as we go forward, I think is phenomenal, and you really should take advantage of it.
So George, with that, we can get started.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, we're on track 2. John, are you hearing the clicking?
There is clicking. I don't know what that is.
Okay, maybe, I don't know, maybe Abel or someone can track that down. Our next speakers, I know them well. In fact, I take great pride in saying that I am part of the Endeavor working group. The session is going to really focus on the private sector perspective on how, at least in Pennsylvania, they started this Endeavor working group model, which has helped businesses work with each other and with state emergency management agency in a trusted framework to solve operational problems in areas including transportation, the COVID-19, supply chain shortages, information sharing. How do you get access to the most recent situational awareness, what the cyber threats are, and those sorts of things. And I think this group is going to really talk a little bit about a great model that Pennsylvania put together that hopefully other states can emulate. Our speakers include Molly Daugherty, External Affairs Director and Private Sector Liaison with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, or PEMA. Patrick Shull, who I've known for quite a few years and a real ball of fire. He's a Director of Security and Risk Assessment for the Harrisburg Properties. And finally, Carmela Hinderacker, Senior Director of Business Continuity and Customer Support for CNS family of companies, a large wholesale of food products. So I'll turn that on to the speakers.
Okay, I should have stopped sharing. Is Carmela, who's going to take the screen? Is somebody going to take the presentation?
I think it's Molly. Molly, are you taking it?
Yeah.
Can you share, Molly?
Well, we actually don't have slides.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine then. We'll talk, and I'll just put the item back here so that they can remember your names.
Outstanding.
Wonderful.
You guys are going to do this extemporaneously.
That's right.
Good for you.
That's right. Let me make sure we have our questions here. I lost my notes page. Carmela and Pat, why don't we start off with a little bit of background on both of you in terms of your work and what kind of brought you to even wanting to participate in something like Endeavor. So Carmela, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So Carmela Hinderacker, as mentioned, I'm the Senior Director at CNS Wholesale Grocers. So we supply groceries to grocery stores. I've been at the company for a little more than 6 years now. And one of my responsibilities is trying to make better relationships with the public sector, especially where we are based in and where our customers are based in, so that we can keep the food supply chain connected. And so I know previously I also used to work in the government, different parts of offices of emergency management in New York City and Boston. But specifically, so when I started, I was trying to build relationships and realized there were some groups that existed that were private sector, public sector. But as many of you guys know, there are a ton of those type of groups, and then it also just depends on the attendees and the engagement that you get from the other side. So how I got to Endeavor, so I attended a multi-fleet working group, which was based in Pennsylvania, but they had partners from the electric sector and the public sector, and they started inviting other sectors, which is where I was coming with the food sector. And from that, we also saw some pretty good engagement there. And then eventually Pennsylvania, so Molly's agency kind of approached me and some other partners to see if we thought this would be worth doing in Pennsylvania. So that's kind of how I got connected with Molly and Pat too. So Pat, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, and welcome, and I'm grateful to be here with all of you. It's kind of ironic, 30 years ago this week, I was running around the desert in the Middle East with my chemical warfare suit on, gas mask, and my M16, and now here I am with my N95. So some things change, but some doesn't. I've been in this position for close to 20 years in downtown Harrisburg. And what I found out early on is if the public and private sector, if they don't share information and work together, they end up working against each other. Often we talk about working in silos, but really if the private and public sector doesn't work together, they don't work separate from each other, they work against each other. And so I have been very grateful over the years, and especially since we had an opportunity to start Endeavor, to work at the local, county, state, and federal levels where that partnership has developed. You know, if you think about, I'd like for everyone kind of think about this. You're driving down the road that you normally drive every day or frequently, and you come to a bridge, and the bridge is there, but there's a big sign that says bridge out. You don't see, there's no problems, the bridge is there, and you're not sure whether to go around it or not, and there's no one there to tell you why it's out or what's wrong. Now, you can go around the sign and the bridge could collapse, or you can go around the sign and everything will be fine. But when you have a private-public sector partnership like Endeavor, you find out just the importance of why that bridge is out. It makes sense, and here's an alternate route, and here's how we can work together to get your job done and their job done at the same time. So that's how it's worked. There's many examples of it, and hopefully we can discuss it as we move along. Thank you.
You know, it's when we talk about Endeavor, Endeavor didn't exist as the name Endeavor really until Pat and Carmela took the reins as co-chair of our program. And Pat, I believe you developed the name Endeavor. And when we look at kind of that private sector integration into emergency management and Pennsylvania, what we found from the state government side is that it's interesting. We work for the citizens of Pennsylvania. We work for the businesses in Pennsylvania, and but it's very difficult to reach businesses as a state government agency, and there are a number of reasons for that. Certainly, we all know businesses, but it creates an unusual environment when government calls a business out of the blue and says, "Hey, we'd like to share information." There's no relationship, there's no context for it. And often state agencies are in the position of having regulatory relationships with businesses, or there's political relationships with businesses and citizens. So it was actually a real challenge for state government and emergency management to be able to develop relationships with Pennsylvanians in order to make sure business continues, in order to make sure citizens and the communities are resilient. From emergency management's perspective, we run into challenges all the time with communities both being able to respond during a disaster and then also being able to recover from disasters. And for many years, emergency management had the position of, well, there's an area that's been flooded, the power is out, we're going to go send water, we're going to go send food. And what happens is it creates a dependency of that community on emergency management and government. And we're taking away the opportunity for businesses in that area to be able to resource their own communities. We make decisions for very deeply researched policy questions and answers. And then we often don't know what the impact of that is. And a terrific example is we have a lot of roadways in Pennsylvania. We have a lot of hills in Pennsylvania. And we have a heck of a lot of traffic, truck traffic, both north-south as well as east to west. And when we make decisions about, let's say, travel restrictions on the interstates in order to keep folks safe and stop the drain of resources being able to respond to accidents, there's an impact to industry on that. And being able to have conversations with businesses to know what that impact is and perhaps understand what that means to Pennsylvania is a really important thing to do. And so Endeavor for state government is just an unprecedented and remarkably important relationship that we develop. When we started this iteration, it was actually, we had different programs begin and end. And when our current governor began his administration and the director for Emergency Management Agency started, they noticed that all hazards was still continuing the important work they had done years before. But they also noticed that PEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management, wasn't involved with all hazards anymore. And one of the most important, really, foundations of the Endeavor program is that we don't want it to depend on any one government person in their position. It needs to transcend administrations. It needs to transcend government. And so Endeavor is really a representation of that relationship that we develop. And really the only way it's going to work is if it's private sector led with government at the table. And so I'm curious from Carmela and Pat, how did Endeavor change the way you communicated and prioritized with your industry partners? As well as
Go ahead, Carmela.
Okay. So we've been going for what now? 2 years? 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
2 years, Pat, probably? Yeah. Yeah. So in the past 2 years, so one, we definitely, if there's planning happening within the company and we want to kind of know what the government's thinking, it is a very simple email that I try and get to Pat and Molly to say, are you guys thinking about this too? I think especially when we started off with COVID, you know, you were seeing it kind of cross different, you know, it started off in the West Coast and then it started spreading a lot quicker. And so, you know, initially it kind of started off with what are people thinking? And then it got ramped into a really big planning effort at the state level with the private sector there. So we start communicating more and even, I would say casually, just kind of throwing ideas across each other. And then with the prioritization, so hearing some of the feedback from the government, we also internally can adjust our operations and then work with our customers on how we continue to deliver to them. So what makes this group a lot different than some of the other public-private sector groups that I'm in is that there is a lot of engagement and it feels like good support, especially with the public sector side. As Molly mentioned, you know, when we first had a real big meeting to kind of jumpstart this whole group, it was located at like the governor's mansion. We had half private sector, half public sector attendees. There was the director of Molly's agency that was there. We had other like mayoral office officials in there as well. So from my perspective as a private sector, it seemed like the government was willing to come in and take it seriously. And so therefore I thought, let me be there too. I needed to be there. So Pat? I
think that with our business neighbors, especially what impacts one business in our area, regardless of type of business, normally impacts all other businesses and the public sector. So what with Endeavor is we have a foundation for a trusted, vetted resource and team. I listened to George in an earlier session on this track, and he was asking about how trust was developed. And it's critical that you can share information with your connections and your related businesses or other folks that you deal with on a regular basis. You can say, okay, this is what I'm hearing through Endeavor. This is what I'm sharing with you, and this is what you can join and be part of too. You don't need to be in safety and security and risk like I am. If no matter what you're doing, we also, some of the public schools in our area, we share the same information with because they have to make decisions. And decisions with their kids impact the decision with our employees because it just kind of goes in a big circle. And so with Endeavor, is you're working off the same information that's vetted, it's reliable, and it's trusted. Sure, sometimes it may not snow as much as they say or, you know, something like that, but you're working together with the same information instead of trying to say, well, I heard this, but you heard that. Well, I got a buddy over there. No, this is where you got real-time vetted information so you can make decisions. And those decisions impact sometimes a lot more than operations. It impacts the people, because when you impact the people of your business, you're impacting every aspect of the business and your community. So Endeavor brings that trusted source, that foundation that hopefully will carry forward for years to come. When I'm rocking on my rocking chair out on the farm, and other folks are taking advantage of the Endeavor Group, and it's consistent regardless of the administration, regardless of the co-chairs, that it's vetted, it's reliable, it's timely, and it's available.
I'm curious, well, in a second here, we'll talk about, how this relationship has helped you in your business, like during emergencies. But leading up to, let's say today, I mean, we've been doing this together for 2 years. And I'm curious kind of what you see has happened over the past couple of years in a non-emergency. Like, how have you seen the times that we've developed these relationships and that trust that you and George have mentioned? How do you see that as, how did that happen over the past couple of years for you two?
Yeah, so I guess in the non-emergency times, which I would say in the past 2 years, I always feel like we're going from emergency to emergency to emergency. But we've definitely had some time periods where, we look back at the lessons learned from a previous event and try and work on that together and not have such a strict timeline or the stress related to a real-time emergency. So Endeavor has helped, again, to continue those relationships. There are obviously more agencies or more people that you kind of meet along the way. We've also held certain, I think at one point we were doing like monthly meetings with the membership, which again included both public and private sector. We did business case resolutions. And then I guess to answer your other question, Molly, about where do we see it maturing over time? Well, I'm hoping we can kind of address other hazards that are, I guess, low probability, but very high consequence, and kind of have that discussion with our group and figure it out across the state. Ideally, too, if we need to bring other sectors that are not your typical, like, let's get on the road, transportation or logistics, that we would bring them in and understand their part of their sector as well. So I just continue to see this being more planning focused instead of us going from emergency to emergency. But of course, those happen all the time anyway. So, Pat?
Well, something I certainly have learned from George over the years is the best time to meet is before you had to meet during an emergency. And obviously, a lot of it's virtual now. But I think one of the important things is we train and we educate and we raise our awareness as part of Endeavor. And the other thing is, let's say it's not a single topic. When something really kicks, let's say it's severe weather, or if it's flooding, or it is a COVID, when it's not those things pressing, you can ask about the things that aren't pressing and kick that around, and you learn about what's going on in someone else's world, and you get an education out of it. So I think one thing about what Endeavor does is when you're not working an emergency together, you're learning together, and you're sharing your pain and also your joys and success stories. So I think it's very important that education continues when we're not all focused together on a similar or the same emergency situation.
Yeah, pains and joys, and if you're involved with Endeavor, you also, Pat will share stories of the farm with you. So can the two of you talk a little bit about the charter, because that's an unusual element of Endeavor that other kind of partnership programs haven't had. And I was hoping you can talk a little bit about what that charter is and how what that represents for Endeavor.
Yeah, so we built a charter to, I guess, establish the trust factor in there. I think a lot of it was kind of, we wanted to be able to have the open conversations, but not have the fear that something confidential would come out. And so that's the basis of the charter. I mean, we don't really have, membership dues or what's required to be a member. I mean, ideally, it's the engagement that you want to put into this group is what we're looking for. So, Pat, do you have anything else you want to add about our charter?
I think the charter says that we're serious about problem solving and working together as professionals, that we're not a fly-by-night. If you're going to be part of Endeavor, it's serious business, it's working together, and it's getting results. And Endeavor has gotten results. So I think it adds formality to it, but I think it also adds a seriousness to it, that it's not, I'll click on this and see what they say. It's a partnership. It's almost like entering into a business where it's a partnership where we are going to work together. We're not always going to agree, but we're always looking for a positive outcome. I think that's what the charter does for Endeavor.
Yeah, that's good. So how has Endeavor helped your business during emergencies?
Yeah, so actually, Molly, probably like a couple days ago, you guys sent out the commercial restrictions because of the snowstorm that went through the state this past weekend. So one from the Endeavor is a lot of our members now started realizing that Molly's agency, so a typical OEM, would send out situational awareness reports, which is really vital for a private company to understand what the government's planning to do so that we can then kind of adjust our operations to it. So when I first joined, we joined that particular, I think comes from your EOC, so a situation report kind of would come out. We also learned more about where to find the main pieces of information related to roads. So they said 511 Pennsylvania is the best place to get the information. And so everyone knew to go there. We knew it was updated. We could ask questions about making sure that we thought that data was the best for private companies. And then the other case study that I wanted to mention was in one of the meetings that we had, it was before the winter season, the director of Molly's agency came in and he said, we're looking to revamp our winter plan, and had asked questions from the private sector. We realized that the restrictions that they were going to go into place had different triggers, also what was also required from the private sector. So did you need, would it apply to empty trailers? Was it just one particular side that they were slowing down? When the speed restrictions would go into place? And then who were all the parties connected to it? So that was really valuable just because no one has ever kind of come up to us to say, hey, we're trying to revamp the winter plan and we want your feedback because we know it affects you. From the private sector, I also realized the real critical need of the responders being safe, and hearing metrics about for every minute that a first responder is out on the street and because of an accident, it raises the risk of that person getting hurt. And so as a private sector person, understood why we were trying to clean the streets, why it might take a little longer, but now just giving me that information earlier just allowed me to, one, temper some of the feedback internally within my company, but also just work around the plan that was going to be put into place, which again, we were involved in.
Yeah, that's great.
Pat?
I would like to use the example of the potential of civil unrest recently. Our footprint, our corporate footprint in Harrisburg is very intertwined with the state agencies. Our largest tenants that pay us rent, where they're our landlord, are state agencies. And so we all could be impacted by civil unrest, civil disturbance, if it would occur. And it has occurred in the past. And so what has worked well recently with Endeavor is that sharing of vetted information and also the trust there. The good example is, Molly, you reached out to me on some information, and I was able to reach out to my private sector contacts with vetted information from you, and then share their information back. So we were able to prepare and plan if civil unrest would come in. And the other thing that really does, if you can share reliable information with your workforce, it has a significant impact on their morale. And it also has an impact on how are you going to manage your operation in the sense of your employees. If they say, well, I couldn't come in because there was a storm and this road was shut down, or I'm too scared to come in because I heard on this social media site that this is going to happen in downtown Harrisburg. What's so valuable recently with the Endeavor, with the civil unrest, is we were able to vet information, share it, plan for it, and it worked out very, very well. And it was done in a trust manner that we're partners in this, we're going to get through this, and it worked out very well.
Yeah, you know, Pat, the example you give, I think to give a little more detail to that, because that really is a success story as well. In the Emergency Operations Center at Pima, we're often challenged with the idea of there's no way we can fix a problem with a 200-mile screwdriver. And solving a problem can be trying to find the resources, or it could even be trying to figure out what the problem is in the first place. And in this case, we were looking at Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg as potential areas during the inauguration of being in, having larger crowds and potential unrest. And in Washington, the week earlier, they found that all of the hotels had been booked. And that's a very good indication of where you can expect large crowds when your hotels are filled. There's no way state government can call, first of all, 15,000 hotels in 3 different cities. And there's also no way we can do that and expect to get any information. So if I call Pat and say, Pat, and I don't know Pat, but Pat knows that a government agency is calling, and I say, are you fully booked this weekend? He has no idea the context, what I'm going to do with that information, and why I would even want it. And but what I could do, because we have this relationship through Endeavor, I can explain kind of the context of we're looking at how we're going to plan, where we need to stage resources, and it's helpful for us to know if the bookings are unusually high for this time of year. The terrific thing about this, though, is that it's not just government to business exchange, it's also business to business exchange. And so we have a number of businesses that will call us to find out, all through last summer, do you know of large gatherings that are planned? And the reason for that is we have banks, we have all sorts of facilities that may not just be in 1 or 2 places throughout the state. They can be in hundreds or even thousands. Or in Carmela's case, she has folks that are traveling through potentially 20 and 30 counties just for one delivery. So it's helpful for the businesses to be able to say, what's happening in this area, so that I know how I can do our continuity planning. And so the times that we're able to not only share the information between business to government, but that the trust is high enough that we're also able to really encourage the business to business exchange is just, we consider that to be a tremendous success. something that really helped us was early on in the pandemic when there was the initial discussion of closures and different businesses that were going to be closed for a period to mitigate the spread. We received a call from Carmela and Katie and her team with CNS and said, look, you guys are about to close. Here's what you can expect will happen. There will be shortages in food in these areas because people will be at home. You can also expect these other conditions. And it's also going to be important to know how, if you're shutting down places that are going to affect care of children, what are the creative solutions that state government's going to be developing for childcare? Because there's no way we can even continue deliveries and continuing, avoiding any disruptions in the supply chain when we can't get our own employees to show up. And that was a tremendously important piece of information that we received, because when we're looking at what closures and what constitutes a daycare versus a school versus a camp, those are all factors that go into, if there's a closure, what's the impact? And is the mitigation measure worth the impact that it's going to have? And having an awareness of the impact to just the basic supply chain and making sure that we have the critical supplies going to the places that we need them, into the communities. We wouldn't have had that without being able to have that honest exchange. I don't know at any time that Carmela or Katie from CNS have ever said, asked a question with the expectation that I will have an answer right away. But I always am so grateful when we hear those questions, because they're not questions that we may have thought of. And that's what that relationship's supposed to be able to do. So that was tremendously successful, I thought. Pat, are there other case studies that you have that you want to kind of highlight in terms of that show the value of our relationships?
Well, I tell you what, if you think about, I'm looking at a really big sign right here in my office that was on Wednesday, December 4, 2019. And I saw that Dan Scully, he was with Dauphin County then, now with Lancaster, was there. You were there, Molly, and it was Through the Storm. And we were able to bring together in the atrium of Strawberry Square, our downtown primary property, and questions and answers and share information and that sort of thing, just on how do we deal with the weather. And if you think about it, with the storm that we could potentially have coming up, once again, people now are saying, are you hearing anything through Endeavor? How do I get on that site again? Hey, what's 511 PA or is it 511 PA again? So when you have those types of relationships, people trust you, they come back to you. They may not pay attention the first time, but then it becomes important. And then they realize, okay, I know the source to go to and what to build upon. And it just, once again, goes back to that relationship, I think, which is the heart of Endeavor, is developing those relationships.
Yeah, both of you have pointed out something when we talk about vetted information. And during the non-emergency times, when we have either use case discussions or even cross-sector information exchange, there's something that Endeavor does that I've not seen before. And that's where the private sector decides what information is vetted. So I think one of the earliest times we did that was with the 511. And it was that the discussion we had PennDOT, State Police, and the Pennsylvania Turnpike in a room with a number of our BEOC or Endeavor partners, and Carmela and Pat were there. And they were explaining even something as basic as, what does an empty tractor trailer mean? Because there actually is a definition for it. And you can have a third of a load of feathers, or you could have a third of a load of steel, and the weight difference is quite large. And we started to talk about there's language that we use that may not be clear from the private sector. And that led to kind of a presentation from 511 Pennsylvania. And you all decided whether that information was going to be of use to you and that Endeavor would consider that to be a vetted source. I kind of want to hear from your perspective, like how important that might be for, for your business to be able to do something like that.
Hey, Molly, can you just reframe that question again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. In being able to, I was hoping you can kind of talk a little bit about the experience that we had with 511 PA and being able to talk through what it was, and then how you all decided that that was going to be the vetted resource. Like how did that all happen, and what is the value of doing that?
Yeah, so I actually live in New Hampshire, so I don't even have the pleasure of living in Pennsylvania, but I have to know everything about Pennsylvania. And in this meeting, I realized that the Pennsylvania Turnpike is a separate agency than just the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. And so the Turnpike, which it runs west to east, had their own kind of authorities and descriptions. And so they were also trying to align with DOT. So we're in this meeting seeing that. And then I believe they were also the ones that mentioned, well, in general, you can get the road closures on Pennsylvania 511. And then they also had described how often it updated, which was helpful. And then what was also helpful was in the website, it showed the color coordination of the different types of restrictions, because it wasn't just you close all these roads at once. Some of them had speed restrictions. Some of them had just very specific commercial restrictions. So we were able to see that. I think, honestly, I can't remember, but maybe Pat, you do. I think we just kind of kept pressing them about the data in there, and they were answering it. And so therefore we are like, okay, then this is it. It sounds like we are now really going towards this one website, and you're telling me that it is good and it's accurate. And so you can see like when things pop on, when it pops off. So it does seem like in real time.
Carmela, you're spot on with that. It is real time, and folks can, it can be an app on their phone or other devices. And what was interesting about those meetings when we had 511 there was, I asked Molly prior to the meeting, and I said, can you have a representative from the Pennsylvania State Police there? Because there's going to be maybe some questions that law enforcement would be directed towards them. And Molly pulls off having the major in the state police in charge of the patrol division. And what was neat about that, he was sitting in the back of the room at Harrisburg University, up a little further, and everyone turned around when he started talking. They found out he's a real person. He's not like off in a kingdom somewhere, and he's not a computer or a robot. He's a real guy with a first name, last name, walks and talks, and was enjoying a cup of coffee with us. And he said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I understand that. But one thing he said was, remember, we don't make the laws, we enforce them. So if you want changes, we're not the one to make the changes, but we'll certainly work with you. And so that really resonated, I think, with the whole group that was there that day. They're saying, okay, we got a real-time valid website that's sponsored by the public sector with their agencies contributing to it. Here's some of the stuff we need out of it, and here's how we can contribute, including your dashboard, Molly, that we now have. And so having real people like that saying, once again, it's not them and us, it's, hey, that's him or her, we know them. Going back to what I said about George, meet him before the emergency and develop that relationship. So I really think 511 is a successful story. And matter of fact, at our safety committee today here at work in preparation for next week, I reminded everyone, right here's the best website you can use in the state of Pennsylvania is 511 PA.
Great. You know, something that happened early on in the pandemic as well, which really shows kind of that business to business network, is when a number of the grocery stores were concerned about security and runs on food, run on certain resources like toilet paper. And it's kind of funny in Pennsylvania when we're expecting winter weather, for some reason there's a run on bread, milk, and eggs. I don't know if it's like that in other states, but it seems that French toast is a big deal here when it snows. But in all seriousness, during the pandemic early on, there were some real concerns about security. And from the perspective of state government, we don't run security at individual stores. That's not our role. But what our role is to make the different connections from the different state agencies, and then also within Endeavor Network itself. And so we had a few of the businesses that were calling and asking, and we also had one of our associations that represents a number of grocers asking. And we were able to connect those folks with other Endeavor members. So George G. We have some of them may not have been Endeavor members at the time, but they work closely with Endeavor members. So they were able to work with a number of security businesses as well as some of the associations to try to work through how could we do this locally to help keep the grocery stores safe. And certainly from a state government perspective, we're particularly interested in making sure that certainly everyone stays safe, but the stores stay open so that people are able to continue to get their toilet paper and whatever they need, because that's how you keep communities resilient. So it's that business to business networking that we get so excited every time we see that. It's really what we want to see too.
It really helps reduce the panic too, doesn't it, Molly?
It does. It does.
Yes.
So what recommendations do you have to improve resiliency to the folks participating in this discussion today?
Yeah, I mean, I think both Pat and I have probably said the same keywords over and over. I mean, you definitely need people who can make decisions or find someone who can make decisions within their own private company or agency. Two, that you are committed to want to make change, given it being slow or not, and also being engaged. I think, again, the pitfalls of some of these other public-private sector groups that I've been in is just we're not going anywhere. And for someone from a private company who has to attend, 50 different groups, I'm going to put my energy in the one that's a little more productive or fruitful or shows interest in in my opinions. Again, it's not that you guys are going to take everything I say and then go do it, but it is this trust and partnership that I'm indebted for this particular group. And so just making sure you have the right members, the right agencies, and the commitments from both organizations, both sectors, in that you want to help the local jurisdiction or the state overcome complex problems. Pat?
With Endeavor, our desire is always to move forward. So we could sit around and identify problems or challenges that we share or that are isolated all day, every meeting, but nothing gets done. Where Endeavor moves forward, and if you're going to be resilient in any kind of business, small or large, or depending on the diversity of your business, you need to move forward and solve problems to the best of your ability. And one thing that came out of Endeavor for me is sometimes I would get really stuck in the mud on something that was important to me that would take a long time to get resolved within my own organization. And what I learned through Tom Moran and others is, okay, put that use case, make it a use case, put it in the parking lot. Doesn't mean you neglect it or don't come back to it. But what you can move forward, move forward. And I think that's a difference too, what Endeavor makes, and what I would encourage folks listening to be part of Endeavor or to look at their own processes within their own organization is, don't get stuck in the mud. Keep moving forward with what you can move forward with. Go back to that when you can, but just don't sit around, whine and complain and identify something without trying to get it done. And Endeavor, I think, in all sincerity, has accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. And everyone's a facilitator. No one's a grand champion. It's just, we facilitate the issue to work through it and we move on. And that's what I really like about it. There's not too many chiefs and no Indians. What there is a group of facilitators working together to resolve problems where they can and move on. So if you're going to be resilient, you got to overcome challenges. And that's how I would recommend to do it.
Hey, Molly, this is George. We're up against the clock. If I could just add in, what's nice about this group, being a part of it, is that people check their egos and their competitive nature at the door, and we're all kind of on level grounds discussing common issues. But what does a business need to do to be a part of Endeavor? I guess it doesn't cost them anything, and the operational advantage or efficiency is phenomenal for you to get that information. One of the things that I asked businesses long ago, what did they consider to be the most important thing that they want from government? And almost to a man, the answer was actionable information in a timely manner. If you're part of the Endeavor working group, you're going to get these situational updates periodically as to what's going on, even under blue sky conditions with a pending snowstorm or some issues, civil unrest or whatever it happens to be. So not being part of Endeavor working group, you're really causing your company to be at a disadvantage. There really is no reason to not take part of this valuable resource.
George, I appreciate that. Yeah, we the value and the success of Endeavor I place on the laps entirely of our private sector partners. We're just so grateful for the involvement, the direction, and the leadership from each of you. So I think my resiliency recommendation is you need a Carmela, a Pat, and a George, and you'd be good to go.
Hey guys, thank you very much. This is such a great model. I think that more and more states should try to emulate. It's really a paradigm shift that is long overdue, and it's that building of trust that really makes it a great success. So thanks to Molly, Carmela, Pat for sharing your thoughts and your experiences with the group. Like to thank you all for taking that time to deal with it. I don't see any questions on the Q&A chat box, so that'll lead us right into the next session, John, unless there's something that I'm overlooking.
That's fantastic, Molly, Carmela, and Pat. I appreciate your help. Thank you very much. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Take care now.